Once upon a time, in a dark and sinister forest, where the wind howled like a demon, there lived a legend about a dangerous werewolf. It was a creature that fused the traits of a werewolf and a vampire, and its thirst for blood was unquenchable. The nights in the forest were filled with the screams of his victims, and anyone who dared to go there alone risked becoming the next victim. One day, a young girl named Alice went into the forest, ignoring the warnings of the locals. She was confident that she could handle all the dangers, and did not believe in the legends of the werewolf. However, when she was in the deepest gorge, an ominous howl pierced the silence of the night, and immediately Alice felt that she was being watched. A reverse gaze filled with bloodlust reflected in the darkness, and the girl knew that the werewolf was already close. She started to run, but the dark trees of the forest seemed endless, and she knew that running was useless. And then, when everything seemed lost, something mysterious happened that forced the werewolf to retreat. But what it was remains a mystery, the history of which remains unsolved. When Alice stopped, trembling with fear and exhaustion, she heard the whisper of the wind, as if an unknown voice was telling her the way. Heading in the direction of the whisper, she finally came out to the stream. The moonlight reflected off the water, and in the distance she heard the eerie howl of death. Alice felt that she was in danger, but the whisper of the wind pulled her forward. Finally, she reached an old abandoned house where legends told of a wise sorcerer who once contacted a werewolf and deprived him of his freedom. The howl began to get closer, and Alice found the entrance to the house to hide. Inside, in the darkness, she heard noises and dead footsteps. Suddenly, she saw an old man in a dark cloak, his eyes shining in the gloom. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, trying to convince the girl to run away. But Alice was stubborn. She knew she needed to find out the truth about this place and the werewolf. Before the old man could say anything, the ominous howl turned into a ferocious roar, and the walls of the house shook under the powerful blows. "He found us," the old man said, gathering his courage. "We will have to join forces to stop him." Then he handed Alice an ancient scroll and said that the answer to all the riddles lies in this ancient knowledge. As the walls cracked under the blows of the werewolf, the old man and Alice quickly began to study the ancient scrolls. They found references to an artifact capable of keeping a werewolf under control, and a rite that allowed him to be set free. The old man began to explain to Alice that the house they were in was built as a shelter from the werewolf, and that he himself was a descendant of those who possessed ancient knowledge. For several centuries now, they have been making sure that the werewolf does not get out and bring darkness into this world. But something went wrong, and the old man guessed that someone had recently freed the werewolf. He told Alice that they should go to the old temple, which was deep in the forest, to find an artifact that would be able to keep the werewolf under control. However, strange things began to happen in the house. Objects moved by themselves. The air was filled with a heavy sense of evil. And then, when the tension reached its peak, the werewolf broke through the wall and burst inside. Alice and the old man rushed to the exit, but the werewolf was too fast and stronger. Suddenly, a strange silhouette appeared from the shadows, hiding in the darkness. He spoke a few words patronizingly, and the werewolf slowed down, as if under a magical influence. It was another magician who held the werewolf in place in time to save Alice and that old man. The stranger told them to run away and promised by intriguing hints that they would be found later. The journey to the temple was full of dangers. The forest seemed impenetrable, and the wind carried unkind sounds, reminding of the dangers that await at every turn. The old man taught Alice ancient spells and witchcraft words, telling her about the secrets of their magical ancestors. Meanwhile, Alice also began to understand her power and intuition better. feeling that magic was flowing in her veins. Finally, they reached the temple, which stood in universal horror and grandeur. Upon entering the temple, they found many statues and relics, including weapons related to werewolves. But it was not clear where their desired artifact was located. The old men directed Alice deep into the temple, where, according to legend, there was an underground sanctuary where the most powerful artifacts were stored. But when they finally got close to the sanctuary, they found that the temple also did not stay away from the effects of the werewolf. Magical defenses were violated, and many historical sites were damaged. They found a void in the sanctuary itself. Their artifact was stolen. They felt their hopes waning and that there was less and less time left. At this important moment, they heard a noise behind them. Turning around, they saw a figure cautiously approaching them. The mysterious magician reappeared in front of them, and his gaze was filled with mystery and wisdom. He informed them that the artifact was stolen by a dangerous magician who wants to free the werewolf and use his power for his malicious purposes. Now they had to make a heroic journey to find the artifact and stop the dark evil that threatened the world. However, the magician warned that there would be not only physical dangers on their way, but also trials of temptation and faith. He gave them the initial instructions and disappeared, leaving them alone with their thoughts and fears. When the mysterious magician disappeared, Alice and the old men were left alone. Mixed feelings of hope and apprehension filled their hearts. They were ready for the challenges that lay ahead of them, and decided to go in search of the stolen artifact. The journey was difficult. Countless trials created by the evil magician met them on the way, labyrinths of lies and delusions, spells of entanglement and deception, trials in the form of battles with shadow creatures. But thanks to the wisdom of the old men and Alice's courage, they overcame one test after another, moving forward towards their goal. But the closer they got to the artifact, the more irritated the werewolf became. His magical essence carried a deadly tension, and they realized that time was running out. Eventually, they came to an abandoned castle, where, according to their information, an evil magician was ensconced. They understood that this place could be their last resting place before facing the werewolf and magician. New secrets, dangers, and dark forces awaited them in the castle, which they did not yet know. But they were determined to fight to the end, knowing that the fate of the world depended on their success. When Alice and the old men entered the abandoned castle, their senses tensed. The dark corridors and labyrinths of the castle enveloped them in a gloomy atmosphere, and they felt like a tangle of shadows and magic hung in the air. The old man led Alice through the castle, leading her through a maze of closed doors and hidden traps, which highlighted the old man's extensive knowledge and experience in the field of magic and artifacts. Finally, they came to the main tower of the castle, which was supposed to contain the stolen artifact. However, when they approached the tower, they found its guards creatures from the darkest nightmares created by an evil magician. The battle was inevitable, and the old men and Alice fought with desperation and determination. After a hard struggle, they finally entered the tower, where they found an artifact surrounded by magical symbols. However, as they approached him, an evil magician appeared in front of them, surrounded by darkness and magical energy. He proclaimed that they would never be able to take possession of the artifact and survive. In this world, the old men and Alice knew that it was time for the final battle. Their magical knowledge and strength were their only hopes. They were preparing for a fight when suddenly the old men noticed something that disappeared. In the stolen bustle of the magician, it was a small piece of parchment with a mysterious symbol. It reminded the old man of something ancient and great that he had forgotten over the years. Grabbing a piece, he hurried to convince Alice to escape and begin the evacuation. But before takeoff, the magician prevented them, threatening not to reimburse them if they did not retreat, commanding with fortitude and bravery, demanding protection and safety. They renewed their fortitude, ready to fight this arrogant enemy even if it would be the last thing they do. And so, when the old man began to begin the forgotten verse, the magician seemed to be slowing down and dangerous, which he did not see while he was distracted. A piece of parchment flashed on these words. The glow swelled, and at the last moment, the old man and Alice were wrapped in a flash of light. After a flash of light, Alice and the old man discovered that they were in a completely different place. There was a boundless forest around them. A light mist covered all the objects around them. They felt that something had changed in them, something more than they could understand. Moving through the forest, they heard the noise of an unusual crackling sound. As they approached, they discovered that it was fire, and in its flames they saw the reflection of their faces, but they changed. Their eyes glowed with magical flames, and their silhouettes seemed to be surrounded by a radiant aura. It was at this moment that they realized that they had turned into powerful magicians. They realized that during the battle with that evil magician and the werewolf, they attracted a huge amount of magical energy that changed them forever. And now they possessed incredible power and majestic magic. The fierce battle had an unexpected and surprising outcome, and instead of defeating the enemies, they defeated themselves and discovered a new, incredible reality. They decided to use their new powers to fight evil and protect the world. A new path opened up before them, full of amazing opportunities and adventures. They realized that their magical power was called into existence not for personal revenge, but to serve higher purposes. Alice and the old man finally found the peace they had been looking for so long, and they were destined to become defenders of the world and keep the dark forces under control. Their story ended in an unexpected and wonderful way. They found a new purpose and became legends. They were chosen to become guardians of justice and peace in this world. Their adventures were just beginning, and the wonders they experienced remained eternal riddles waiting to be solved.